On today's episode of Let's Talk Dog Business, we are speaking with Andy Nisevic, talking all things disc profile. So get ready to learn all about your personality profile and how it is affecting your business. Hi, Andy. It is so nice to have you on our podcast. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me on it. I'm delighted to be here. I'm very well. How are you both?
Yeah, we're good.
We're
good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Vicky's getting over the lurgy. So,
yes, I'm feeling much better than
apart from the lurgy. Yeah.
Apart from the lurgy. All is good. All is good. Yeah.
Oh, so this is a bit of an unusual episode, I suppose, because we know each other from our mastermind group, don't we?
We do, yes.
It's been lovely getting to know you over the last, I can't even remember how long it's been now. It's been a fair while now, hasn't it?
It's been at least a year, hasn't it? Because of the various different groups and things like that we've been a part of.
Yeah, no, it must be. It must be. So actually, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you do some amazing things that may not make any sense to anybody. But then specifically, the reason we wanted you to come on here today is you seem to have a superpower about understanding some personality profiling. And I thought it'd be really interesting to go into. But tell everybody a little bit about yourself because you've got quite an interesting background compared to what you're doing now.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Andy Nisevic. I'm the founder of a company called 1 Degree, and we are a workplace performance specialist. For simplicity, that's leadership development, but it's aimed at developing the skills and the tools within leaders to be able to recognise what each individual they've got working for them needs in order for them to kind of optimise their workplace performance without kind of venturing into burnout, without venturing into stress. And it includes things like personality profiling, of which DISC is one of them. And I love the way that you put it as a superpower, because whenever I meet anyone new at a networking event, I always ask the question, what's your superpower? Because I'm a bit of a geek. So one of my superpowers is really looking at the personality profile of the individual and kind of recognizing, right, what are the motivational traits that's going to work best for them? How do I need to communicate with them in order for them to have the best experience, whether it be one-to-one or group?
Nice. And how did you get into actually doing this as a service offering, I suppose?
I suppose it starts before I started the company. So you alluded to my background. I spent 23 years in the Royal Air Force, and I absolutely loved the service. I was lucky enough to be in the right kind of jobs with the right kind of leaders that enabled me to promote relatively quickly. But one of the things that I always struggled with was actually being able to engage multiple people. I've led teams that are kind of from really small surgical specialist teams all the way up to nearly 3 figures of people reporting to me or me being responsible for them. And I found there was always a certain number of people that I had great rapport with, was able to motivate them, get great results out of them. And then there was always a huge amount of people, for whatever reason, it just became a functional relationship rather than one in which all of us thrived. So for years, I operated under the assumption that was normal. As I became more experienced and more knowledgeable, started my own personal development journey, I started to learn that actually there's probably something that I'm doing wrong, because it doesn't seem right that this is just normal. So I started researching psychology, human behavior, and by the way, human beings are absolutely nutters, every single one of us. How we've survived as a human race, I've got no idea, because we're barking mad. We sabotage ourselves at every opportunity. But that's, I suppose, a completely different subject. And my final job was teaching the Air Force's leadership courses. And it was there that I found this personality profile called the Strength Deployment Inventory. And that's a really, really deep personality profile that looks at like the core of who we are as an individual, what our strengths are, what our motivators are, the kind of things that put us into conflict. So, i.e., that if you ever think about people that you've worked with or maybe are part of the same social circle with you, but for whatever reason, you just can't click with them. They've not done anything wrong or bad. They're not a bad person, but you just can't, for whatever reason, build rapport with. The strength deployment inventory kind of looks at you can start to recognize where your character traits are just naturally at conflict with their character traits. And that's a really good one. When I started my coaching diploma, I was introduced to DISC. And DISC is one of the best tools out there, in my opinion, because it's really accessible. It's really low cost personality profile, but it looks at how we communicate as individuals. So the 4 different personality profiles, and how one person just being their natural self is immediately not going to have an effective conversation with somebody else just because they communicate in a way that's not efficient for each other.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued about DISC because I'm new to this, and I hear people talk about I'm a D or an I, and I really don't get it. So, this will be a good lesson for me, this podcast as well. So can you give everybody a bit of an idea about how it's segmented, how it what's the importance of knowing what you are and what you lean towards in certain situations? And I think it's about you're a certain type in a certain type of situation. I mean, this is just my very ignorant view on it.
So it's not necessarily that you're a certain type in a certain situation, but you do have a natural style and an adapted style. So let's say, for example, you start a new job. And our natural kind of subconscious drivers, because we as human beings, we thrive within community, we will adapt ourselves to fit into that community. So DISC is a great tool to kind of recognize what your adapted profile is. It happens if you're in a new relationship or you get out of a relationship, you start a new job, you have a new boss come in. All of these sorts of situations can lead to you behaving in a different way. It has benefits because it helps bring people together. But the longer you spend in your adapted profile, actually the harder it is to kind of maintain that thriving performance, because it's exhausting. In effect, you're subconsciously trying to be somebody who you're not. And that is really, really draining, and it can affect performance, it can affect relationships. So having an awareness of what your natural style is, and kind of having leaders, managers there that kind of understand what your natural style is and doing everything they can in order to help you get back and be in your natural style is only going to kind of help you optimize your personal performance, because you're not wasting energy on trying to be somebody who you're not.
So does this relate to when people say, and this is quite common in the dog industry, people say they're people pleasers, they're trying to always do the right thing for the people, and in doing that it takes them away from their true self, or it is exhausting, like we do hear that it is exhausting. So yes, would you liken it to that then?
Absolutely. One of the profiles is very much a stereotypical people pleaser profile. That was easy for me to say, wasn't it? And you find a lot of people who are coaches, who are trainers, kind of people who go into kind of service-based industries where you're trying to help other people, and whether that be as a dog trainer, help people to kind of have this happy, healthy, thriving dog, or whether it be a personal development coach, a performance coach, a confidence coach, whatever that is, they tend to be of a certain profile that means that they overgive to the detriment of themselves. And that is a character trait, particularly within one of those profiles. Do you want me to go through the 4 individual profiles?
Yes, please.
My brain is whirring already from what you've just said, though. Like, the fact that we probably, is how I've taken it anyway, we lean in heavier on the adaptive style rather than actually owning our true self.
Style, yeah.
I just think that is fascinating. And I think because I've done quite a lot of personal development work, I can actually see how much I do lean in on my adaptive style a lot and not go into my superpower enough, I don't think.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting.
It can be strange because obviously we lean into our adaptive style because that's what suits the dynamic of that group. So when your group dynamic suits your natural style, that's great because you're really going to thrive in that environment. But when you have to adapt your style, then it's going to work in the short term. You're going to get some great short-term results, but there will come a point where your own energy is just going to be lowering and lowering and lowering until you get to a stage where at best you're just tired all of the time, even though you're doing all of the things to kind of look after yourself. So the 4 profiles, we've got D, I, S, and C. I always work better. My brain works better at the letters. Other people like the colours. So D is red. I'll test myself to remember this properly. I is yellow, S is green, and C is blue. So if you're a D or a red profile, they're very direct people. They're people that are very domineering, they're very decisive, they're quick to act, they can be seen as quite rash, but for them, their motivator is just get out there, get the job done, get the results, and everybody's happy. But because of their direct nature, the way that they speak to people can be quite blunt. So it can be quite off-putting to people, whereas actually all they're doing is just trying to get the job done in order to keep everybody safe and everybody happy, give the team the results they need, give the business the results they need in order to continue. They are absolutely fantastic for when you've got really tight deadlines or pressures on, because they will go out there and they will work until the job's done, because that's their motivator.
Does he sound like anyone?
Yeah, sounds like Joe.
Their greatest fear is failure. So they will do everything they can in order to kind of ensure that they don't fail. Huge risk takers. They will spend money, they will take risks, they will cut corners in order to get the job done. But inevitably, they don't care about making mistakes because they know that they'll figure out a way and they'll get it done and it'll get done right. The I profile, or yellow, they tend to be very happy, bubbly, cheery type of people. They're very good at kind of integrating into teams. They're good at kind of bringing other people into teams. And I, within a business that's kind of going through a change management process, if they can get an I brought into that change, the I is fantastic at bringing other people in. They're great negotiators. If you sell a service that requires you to maintain long-term relationships with your clients, an I in your sales team is going to be fantastic at building those relationships. They're very impulsive. They're very much like that kind of person who's busy doing one thing and then it's like a magpie. It's like, oh, shiny thing, what's that over there? And they'll get something half done and then go and move on to something else because that's now become more exciting. So they can be very impulsive. I used to have an I profile working for me years ago, and he had 50% of lots of things done and nothing fully complete. Because it's very much, oh yeah, that sounds exciting, I'm going to go and do that. Their people profiles, it's rather than D's task focused profile, the I is a people focused profile. So they want everybody to be happy. Their greatest fear is being rejected. So they do everything they can in order to make sure the team is kind of together and everyone's happy.
Why the puzzled face, Joe?
Well, can you have a bit of both? Because when I've done this work before, admittedly, I've not done it in any great detail. I was identified as initially an I and a D. So I've got both profiles in me. Yeah, so would that be one of the adaptive and one of the strong suit, or do you have a blend of both?
80% of the population are a blend of 2 or more profiles. So it's really, really hard to pigeonhole people based on their kind of primary profile because they've got a blend, they've got other skills and other strengths. You do tend to find that certain people will be attracted to certain types of jobs. So the ID profile is, for me, in my opinion, it's the perfect profile for kind of high ticket sales, those kind of sales roles where you're selling long-term services, because somebody might have to spend 5 figures in order to kind of, like a mastermind, for example, they might have to invest 5 figures in order to do that. They're not going to they're not necessarily going to say, yeah, I've met you for the last 5 minutes. I know 5 minutes worth of information about you. Here's £10,000 or £15,000, etc. They're going to want to be nurtured. They're going to want to be cared for. They want to make sure that that investment is safe, particularly if they're one of the slower moving profiles. Now, at high D, they're going to think, can you get me the results? Yes, and they'll spend the money. But
can you just clarify? Sorry,
yeah.
Can you just clarify? When you say high D, what does that actually mean?
So somebody who's a D profile, but kind of a really, really high on that D scale. So you do get 5% of the population that's only got one. Sorry, just going to clarify that. 20% of the population have got one, but 5% of the population are so overwhelmingly high on just one profile characteristic that they're just all in. They are all that. So I've got a client who is 98% D. It's the highest I've ever seen, and they've got nothing else in their profile. They are extremely fast moving, extremely decisive, and he spent £15,000 on my services after meeting me for an hour. Because I wish I could meet more people like that. Because it makes sales so much easier, wouldn't it? But that's it's very much right. You can get me the results that I'm looking for. I'm going to spend money. But because the vast majority of the population are a blend of other profiles, the vast majority of people we're going to meet, if we're selling high ticket services to them or kind of ongoing services, they're going to want to be nurtured. So that ID is a really good blend of personality profile, because there's the I in there that's fantastic at building relationships, but then there's also the D in there that's fantastic at getting the results.
And if you describe somebody as an ID, for example, is I the predominant one, and then D is there's a little bit of D in there as well?
Yes. So whichever one comes first, that's kind of the primary profile. So you can be ID, you can be DI. There is I can't remember what the statistics are. I think it's around 10% of us that have 3 within us. But that's a really real superpower in itself as well, because we tend to be able to adapt to any situation.
Okay.
I'm so intrigued on this. Like, I can see lots of D and I in me. Can you?
Yes.
Okay.
Lots of D.
You've got really big eyes.
Have I?
Like, yes.
Yes, you have. Very determined face.
I like it. Okay, so now we've got S and C.
Yeah. So D and I are very fast moving profiles. D with a task, I with people. The S and C are much slower moving profiles. Now, I need to clarify, that doesn't mean they're slow people. It just means that they're far more considered in their approach, and they take much more time to make decisions. So S is another people profile. It stands for steady. They like things to be nice and steady, nice and stable. They like everyone to be safe and secure. So there's a lot of similarities between the S and the I in the fact that they like everybody to kind of be happy, but the S priority is much more about stability within job role, keeping things the same, making sure everybody feels safe and they're nurtured and they know what the requirements of them are. They're great empaths, so they're really, really good at understanding what other people need in order to be secure and be able to do the job that's required of them. Their greatest fear is change.
Oh my God, this is you. I feel like there's a little bit of this in you.
Only a little bit.
I love it. We need to do. We actually need to do the actual test thing.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing because you'll get a graph. You'll see how much of each profile. So every single one of us has a bit of every profile in as well. 95% of us have a bit of every profile in us. It's just there's a line. Kind of then the closer you are to that line suggests it's not necessarily a driving characteristic that you do have with it. If it's above the line, that means it is a driving characteristic, and then whichever one is the highest, that's your primary one. So yeah, the vast majority of us do have tendencies for each one. We just have preferences for each one as well. The C profile is another task focused one. They are, it stands for compliance, for cautious. They hate taking risks. Doesn't mean they won't take a risk, but they'll only take a risk if they've kind of analysed what the requirements are, what the risks are, what the risk mitigation factors, the what ifs, the what if, and they will have contingency plans for everything, and then they will go and take the risk. So whereas the D will think, sod it, I'm going to throw 20 grand at this problem. A C will be thinking, right, if I spend 20 grand on this, what's that going to look like in my cash flow forecasting over the next 6 months? What does it mean that I can't spend money on? What other investments does this company need to make? What other outgoings have we got? What's knock-on effects to the knock-on effect? What's the second order impact? Sorry, I've got a fly just going in my face. A third order impact, a fourth order impact. So it's not that they're slow people, it's that they just consider far more information before they're going off to take a risk and make a decision. The superpower of the C is that in some jobs, in some industries, they will quite literally keep you out of prison. So I do a lot of work with the financial services. So there's a lot of laws, there's a lot of regulations, and they're always changing. You get a new chancellor of the exchequer, and all of a sudden everything changes. So they have to be really, really good at kind of recognizing what the changes are, how it's going to impact things, how people's pensions and investments, their savings, and everything is going to be impacted, so they can give their clients the right kind of advice. So they tend to be very detail orientated people. The thing they hate the most, the thing they fear the most, is being wrong. So if you've got a C profile working for you, and you need to tell them that they are wrong, you better be sure, you better be right, because I guarantee you tell a C profile that they're wrong, they're going to go and read every document, every bit of regulation, everything they can find in order to either prove themselves right or make sure that you were right. So with every profile, there are absolute superpowers and there are downsides to them. The biggest mistake that I see people make when they're not aware of these profiles is that they recruit people based on their characteristics. So you get a lot of people in a business with the same sort of characteristics, which means that you're heavily leaning on kind of one, so you don't have the strengths that the other profiles bring. So I like I say, I do a lot of work with financial services. I've also done a lot of work with engineering firms, and because of the requirements for that, you get a lot of C profiles within that. So they tend to be much slower moving people because they've got a lot of things to consider. They're checking the risks, they're doing their balances and mitigations and everything. But actually means that the growth and the progress of their business is much slower because the people take far more time. Whereas actually, if they were to have a blend within their organization and maybe have a couple of Ds or Is within there, then they'll have people that can give that kind of that push, that emphasis on, right, we need to get these results. So for example, if they're looking to, let's say they're a 6-figure business and they're looking to push on to 7 figures, actually having S's and C's only is going to make that growth progress a little bit slower because they're so careful. Whereas actually having those D's and I's within there will speed those on because they've got people that will go out there, they'll find a business, they'll make things happen. And the exact same thing happens in reverse. If you're a high D or a high I and you only recruit people with those similar sort of characteristics, you've got nobody there whose natural indication is to say, hang on a minute, is this the right thing to do? Which is what your S's and your C's will give you. They'll give you those checks and balances. So the best organizations are the ones that have that blend of the different profiles in there.
So what about then if you are a solo business owner, as I imagine a lot of our audience are? So you're going to be a dog trainer who has essentially just built a business, and it's really hard because I can see so much D and I in me. I can see why I had that quick growth trajectory. Yeah. But then also, I suppose I'm trying to figure out, like, is it, and I don't mean a bad thing, but is it, like, what are the pros and cons of having just that one person in your team? Because I can see where I've certainly taken risks over the years. and made those really quick decisions. And some have worked out and some haven't. But I think the resilience in me as a personality profile anyway, and I don't know, I can almost see like bits of all of those profile bits. But I suppose, what am I trying to actually get at here? It's really trying to think. So if somebody was running their dog training business, arguably, could you even blanket it and say that that type of person would never solely just be like a C profile? Because you're going to have taken some risk to go, I'm going to do this business thing anyway.
So C's can be just as successful as a D's. S's can be just as successful as I's. So they're not a determinant of your success. The difference between let's say a D and a C type profile is, as you've correctly articulated, is right. I don't mind taking a risk, so I'll go and spend the money, and you know what? If it doesn't work out, well, you know what? Okay, I've learned a lesson there. Whereas a C, they will invest money, they will take risks, but what they'll do is they'll spend a lot more time kind of analysing the risk, analysing the impact before they then go off and do it. So growth might be slower, or progress might be slower, but they're going to get it right first time. Whereas D profile, and I can speak, I'm an SD, so I'm what's known as a conflicts profile. I can talk about conflicts in a moment if you like, but my profile is SD, so I'm slow people, fast task in summary. So I when I recognise a need, I could lean into my D and spend money. Over the last 18 months, I've probably invested somewhere in the region of about £50,000 in my own personal development, my knowledge of how to build businesses, how to sell, how to market, and my own kind of personal self-awareness journey as well. The vast majority of that has been money well spent, but there's probably 5 figures worth of money that I've spent that hasn't given me anywhere near those results. Whereas if I had that C within me, then maybe I would have been much more considered, and rather than kind of having that right drive, let's just go and spend the money and go and learn this thing, I'd spend, okay, right, if I learn that thing, what use am I actually going to put it to? How is it going to benefit me? How is it going to benefit the business? Is it something that I really need right now, or is it something to put in the later column, so that when my business is ready for it, I'll do it? And that can be the both the pro of the D, but also the downside is that if you go and spend some money, learn some stuff, if it's going to be really helpful, it will drive you forward. But yeah, I've spent a fair bit of money on things that will be great in a couple of years' time, but no good right now.
I can relate to that.
So I want to just look at this from a slightly different angle.
Sure.
So everything you've described so far, you've been relating it to sort of business goals and maybe working in organisations and leadership roles, which is what you do. And
sure.
I'm thinking of, in terms of, this all applies when it's relationships with people, I'm guessing. Yeah. So the person who's a D is going to be a bit more like, come on, we need to go and do this thing. So let's think of husband and wife at home, that kind of like, come on, let's go make a plan, let's do something. And then you've got your C's going to be like, hang on a minute, let's think about it first. Let's do all this stuff. Like, so am I on the right track here? That person is going to be very similar. Yeah. And I'm just thinking of it in terms of dog trainers again, and their relationships with clients, and how sometimes we forget to think about the client and what they need. So we're not thinking about their personality types and traits. We're just going, well, we work like that, so come on, I've set you this task and I want you to do it. And then we get really frustrated maybe.
The homework for the dog owners.
Yes, yeah. And this is a big problem where we go, oh my God, they're not doing the work. Like, I'm here, I'm giving them everything. So like, I think it's so good to be aware of these things. And I hope that this is really helpful for people to start to think about it in that way.
Yeah, because almost taking that a little step further in how you deliver the follow-up stuff. So it's a bit default, I suppose, for trainers to go, right, so Andy, we've just helped you do a training session with your dog, and you will get a training plan, which will be a written document in some way, shape or form.
Yeah.
And that's typically what it is delivered as. But I'm guessing when you're looking at this DISC profile, we're actually going, well, do you want to do stuff like that? And are you able to learn that way? And it might be going into learning style a little bit, but I imagine there's a bit of that personality profile.
There'll be huge amounts of crossover, yeah. So let's say an information pack. I used to have a dog. Unfortunately, I don't anymore. And I took him to a local dog training school, and we got some brilliant results. And they gave me an information pack, kind of reminding me of the tools and the techniques that they taught me during the day. But then also other information on diet and kind of health and well-being of the dog and things like that. And it was full of really, really good information that sat on my dining table for months and months and months without being read.
Was it ever read?
It was flicked through occasionally. When something was going on, I would just wanted to kind of, I can go and refer to that. But the mistake that they made is because they were very analytical type people, which is which is an attribute associated with the C profile. They wrote this document in a very analytical way with lots and lots of information. Now, it was at 100% accurate. It was great information. There was just so much of it. So my D profile in me just got really bored and really frustrated. But the thing is, as a small business owner, you don't necessarily have the time to create lots and lots of material that's going to be relevant for other people. So one recommendation that I've given some clients over the last couple of years is when you're doing corporate communications, and this we're saying for when you're giving like information packs to your clients, maybe think about how people receive information. So an executive summary with bullet points as a opening kind of page, opening paragraph, that sort of thing. That's going to satisfy those Ds and to a degree those Is. And then later on, the kind of the nitty gritty, the meat on the bones, the information for that, because that's going to satisfy your S and your Cs. And that way you're blending an approach for everybody. I was doing a talk at the events that I was at this morning on DISC profile, but within a sales process. So when you've got clients that are interested in your services, if I'm talking to them as a D profile and all I'm talking to them about is results, but they're a very C profile, they're going to get frustrated because they're not getting the information that they need. They're going to want to ask loads and loads of questions in order to kind of understand, is this the right thing? Are you the right person for them? Is the services that you do right for them? Is the time that your classes are available? Is it one-to-one? Is it group? What kind of open out? All of these sort of things that they're going to want to know. But because I'm so results focused, I'm just going to give them the results. And that's not necessarily going to have a great a rapport building conversation. So if I'm a dog trainer in an area where I've got lots and lots of competition, that person is going to have plenty of other options to then go and find somebody who gives me the information that I require. Likewise, if I'm a C profile, and I'm explaining absolutely everything, what every lesson looks like, everything that we're going to do, and that person's a D that just wants a better behaved dog, then they're going to get bored with all the information. So understanding these different communication styles and the personality profiles that people has gives us that opportunity to adapt our sales conversations, our rapport and relationship building conversations to provide our customers, our future clients, what they need, instead of us just giving them what we think that they need. Because generally what we think we need comes from what we would naturally want, not what they would naturally want.
Oh, I love this. This is so interesting.
I knew you'd like it.
Oh, this is great.
She was saying to me for ages, like, DISC, like, what's the point? Why do you even need to know this? I was like, wait, you'll love it.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it now. Yeah, I'm finding this also interesting because, again, I think when dog trainers create services or create websites, or like we talk a lot about the customer journey and that, you know, you want that smooth kind of transaction through. Yeah. And it's really hard I think it's hard sometimes to look beyond your own view of the world. And this is kind of really highlighting all of that to me, and
Yeah.
it's making
Well,
it
we've
so...
been having like conversations behind the scenes, really, haven't we, about areas of me being in very incredibly high D and how my expectation of Vicky sometimes is just so like it's an unacceptable expectation from me because of me being, I'm very aware I'm high D. I always used to think I was more high I, and then the more people I've spoken to who know DISC, they're like, absolutely not, you are D. I'm like, oh, okay. Even Matt Alwell told me I was a D.
But there's no, this is the thing, because of the way that each profile is explained, a lot of them can get a bad reputation. So that high D, it can be really misinterpreted as somebody who's just really selfish and just out for themselves. Whereas actually, if you break it down and think about, right, what is the motivation behind a high D? The motivation behind a high D is to get the results in order for the business to be sustainable. Because if the business isn't sustainable, other people's livelihoods are at risk. It's just the way that they go about making sure the business is sustainable is about getting the results. Whereas somebody who might be an S profile, they've got exactly the same motivation. They want the business to be safe and sustainable, but their perspective is, well, if everybody feels safe and secure and nothing's changing, everybody remains the same, then we have that consistency, everybody knows what they're doing, therefore they can perform to their best without confusion. But as we know, the world changes. So that D is going to get really frustrated with that S, because that D wants to make changes, wants to adapt to how the marketplace is changing, what our clients are now looking for, the buying mentality of people. I mean, the buying mentality of people in 2024 is very, very different to what it was in 2023. That's something that I've experienced. So a D is going to want to change with the world as quickly as the world is changing, whereas the S just wants everybody to kind of remain the same because that's safe. They both have the same motivation. They both want the same outcomes. It's just their perspective on how to achieve that is different. And that's why you get these conflicts. But the real superpower is just having that understanding that all it is perspective. It's just how different people interpret the world. And when you're able to work together and understand each other's perspective and then figure out a way to kind of work together, actually those profiles that naturally conflict with each other, they become a huge superpower, because you've got all the strengths of the D, for example, going out, getting the results and adapting to the situation. Then you've got all the strengths of the S, which is understanding what the people need in order to be able to meet those changes. And it becomes a real superpower for a business.
And I think it's really relevant what you said earlier about when, as in a business, you tend to look for the people that are similar to you. But I think actually definitely in Joe and I's case, if we were both, say, high D, like that wouldn't be good for anyone, because there wouldn't be that kind of, that like steadiness almost.
She slows me down.
I do slow her down. But you see, this is where it's really hard, because I do feel like feel like I slow you down sometimes. But then I know you're aware of like, you might be too fast for me and I can't keep up with it all. But it's like, these, like, so say if you're defined as, because we're talking a lot recently about labels, right? So if you define yourself as a D or a high D or something, then can that lead you or limit you, or like, how does that affect you if you know what, because I don't know what I am, right? So you've probably got a good idea of what I am, but I don't know. And I don't, almost like a bit scared to know what I am, because then I might go, well, it's because I'm this. And then do you find that limits people, or do you find it defines them?
I think if we label ourselves, it can have that risk, because it becomes an excuse.
Yeah.
So, for example, every profile has a downside. So let's use I's. Very, very impulsive. Jump from one thing to another, easily distracted. But if you say, oh, it's just because I'm an I profile, that's just who I am, then that can lead towards a tendency of not doing anything about it. Because if you just let that be your driving force, yeah, you might get 50% of lots of things done, but actually achieve nothing. Whereas actually, if you can have an awareness within yourself and use it as an awareness tool, as opposed to a label that says, I have a tendency to be very impulsive, to jump from one task to another. Therefore, I need to build strategies within myself to ensure that I can focus until a job is complete and then move on.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely having that awareness. So with, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example now. It's like with me being as high D as, which I think I am. I think I lean more into D, but I've definitely got I in me as well.
Yeah.
Because I've got that awareness, and probably with the support of Vicky and our other mentors as well, because I have that awareness, I'm now actually able to go like, oh, there's a thing. Here's all the money that I haven't got, but have it. And wait, hold on. Let me just hit and I actually am able to hit pause now. It may not be for very long, but I'm hitting the button.
And you kind of have to, because I'm 50% of this. So my opinion does count as well.
Yeah.
But even in my personal decisions and stuff, I've become acutely aware that I now have the ability to hit that pause button. Like I say, it may not be for a long period of time, but it's there. It's not as impulsive.
Yeah, and remember, this is personality profile. It's got nothing to do with like arrogance or anything like that. It's got nothing to do with being a good person or a bad person, a self-aware person, an unself-aware person, selfish or not self. It's got nothing to do with that. So you can have somebody who's a really, really high D, who is still kind and compassionate and caring. It's just that when they're in flow, those natural attributes don't come out quite as easily because they're in flow. They're going after results. They get the results, and that's how they show their care and compassion, by achieving results for other people. So yeah, I mean, like I said, one of my clients, his highest D that I've ever come across, 98 out of 100 on the D scale. But he invests hundreds of thousands of pounds every single year in not only his own personal development, but also the personal and professional development of his entire company. He has spent, in my services alone, he's spent nearly £50,000 in order to give his leadership team and his managers the ability to be able to lead with kindness, with compassion, but also with the skills to hold people accountable and everything like that. He is fully aware that he is a very driven, very direct and domineering person. So he's done a lot of work in order to kind of build the skills within him, so that when he is going at it and trying to achieve, he can slow himself down and say to his COO, who's the complete opposite profile to him, right, what is it that we need in order to be able to achieve this? So that those other profiles can then start doing their strengths and the analysis and saying, right, if we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do A, we need to do B, we need to do C. Once those have done, we need to do 1, 2, and 3. And then once those are in place, that will give us the foundations to be able to drive on and achieve what you're looking for. Whereas in the past, and this is something that he's admitted to me, in the past, it's just go and make it happen. And then everyone's left feeling frustrated. But because he's raised his self-awareness, he understands what his profile tendencies are, it's given him that awareness to say, right, I just need to stop, do a check, ask the questions, find out what's needed. And that gives everybody else then the opportunity to thrive. Likewise with a C. A C who's self-aware knows that their personality profile means that they're not going to make a decision very quickly, because they're going to analyze when they've got other people working for them who are waiting on a decision to be made so that they can crack on with their jobs. That's going to be immensely frustrating. So they might kind of say, right, okay, let's make a decision, allow people to crack on, and then analyze as we're going. Might be a little bit more uncomfortable for them, but they know, because they've got other people that are waiting to make decisions, that they need to start making things happen.
I love all of this.
Once you are what you are, can you once you're once you say I'm an I or a S, whatever, can you change?
So there is the adapted style. We talked about this briefly, but I can't remember if it was before we started recording. So the downside to the disc profile is it's a snapshot of who you are right now. And anything that changes in your work life, in your personal life, can have an adaptation on your style. So as human beings, we are built to thrive within communities that we feel safe within. So when we get a new job, for example, we might, if there's the personality dynamic of that team doesn't necessarily suit our natural characteristics, subconsciously we will adapt how we portray ourselves in order to feel welcomed into that group. And that can have huge benefits because it brings us in, it helps us adapt. But the downside to that is the longer that we spend in that adapted profile, the more tiring it can be because we're not being our natural self. So we will get massive short-term success adapting our style to fit into a group, to fit into the demands of the company. But because we're not being who we naturally are, all the time we're just kind of lowering that energy within us. Lowering energy is probably the wrong way of kind of driving kind of negative factors into our own personal energy, which then means that our own performance, our output, the quality of our work, the way that we interact with people, they just become more and more negative the longer that time goes on. So here's the mistake that a lot of companies use DISC. They'll do a DISC profile, they'll read the report, they might do an hour or two kind of session to understand the profile and how to use it, and then it will go on a file and never get looked again. Actually, the real way to really understand DISC and how to get the benefits of it is that it's constantly available. So one of the things that I get my clients to do is kind of put something on their desk that says, I am this profile, this is the best way to speak to me, try and avoid doing this. And that kind of reinforces that message to people all the time. So if I'm a D and I'm under massive amounts of pressure to get something done, and because I do have quite a strong D tendency within me, I know I can be a massive dickhead sometimes. I can be. It's not because I want to be, it's not because that's who I naturally am, it's because I'm under stress, so I need things to happen. So I can be quite direct, very blunt in the way that I speak to people when I'm under pressure. But if I am able to kind of see that person and I know what that person's characteristics are and how to best get what I need from that person, then it gives me that ability to just check myself and say, right, might need to slow down here. They might be an S-type profile. So they hate offending people. An S-type profile is kind of profile, is what we talked about earlier, that people-pleasing profile, that they will suffer immense stress, and they'll sit there in pain, in emotional pain, psychological pain, and not say anything in order to please other people. That's a huge tendency of those S profiles. So if I'm leaning into my D and I'm acting like a complete dickhead, I'm doing massive damage to that person. But because they're an S, they're not going to show it. So it gives me no verbal or kind of visual cues to say, right, this is the effects that I'm having on this person. So having that as kind of a notice on there, this is the best way, this is how to speak to me to get the best from me, avoid doing this. It gives me that opportunity to just check myself and think, right, how am I showing up and how is that affecting the other person? Because as business owners, whether you're a tiny one-man band like I am, whether there's two of you like you are, or you could have thousands of people working for you, there's always going to be times where we are really on it and we are high performing and everything's going well. And there's also going to be times where things are really, really difficult. And irrespective of what our natural personality are, when things are difficult, we're not at our best self. So having this awareness and knowledge of how to speak to other people in order for us to get from them what we need, that's just going to make things so much easier.
So you're kind of intrinsically what you are and you can adapt it. But say I could never be an A, like that could never possibly, and be comfortable with it and not live in exhaustion and trying to be something I'm not. I would never naturally be an A.
An A?
Is that, not an A, sorry, a D. So where that came from, a D. So I could never be like how Joe is. It just wouldn't ever happen. Is that basically what what we're saying?
No, because that's the adapted profile. In order to fit in, you might be working in kind of a real high output, high stress environment where you need to raise that D. We can do that as human beings. It's not natural to us, but our subconscious, in order to be able to fit in and thrive within that environment, will raise those kind of tendencies within us. It's just the longer we stay in that adapted profile, the more detriment it has to us.
Okay, that's good. It's good to know. So I'll never be a deer.
Yeah.
No, that's it. And I think it's important it's that self-awareness again, isn't it? Because if you think that, and actually, naturally, I reckon everybody listening, because I think we all do this. You know, when you do any type of profiling work anyway, you almost have a little squiz over everything that's there and you go, oh, I want to be that one, because you're drawn to it.
Yeah.
But everyone's going to be drawn to something completely different. So if I saw that down, I'm thinking, oh my God, the best profiles here are a D and an I. Whereas you could be thinking, well, actually, no, I don't. Like, I know you definitely wouldn't like the D profile. You're like, I do not want to go anywhere near that. So when you're looking at those things, it's like, oh, I kind of want to lean into it. But actually, that's more your natural tendency then, because that is your superpower, whichever one you lean into more, because that's your natural stance on it all.
Yeah. And remember that this is where sometimes I dislike the language within DISC, because saying that D's and I's are fast people, S's and C's are slow people. It's not about being so. You can have a strong C-type profile who still operates faster than a D, because they could be an absolute expert and genius in their field. They've already done all the research. They've already done all the analysis. They know what the right thing to do is. Whereas a D, who, yes, they might have that natural kind of inclination to just go out there and get the job done, they're going to make loads and loads of mistakes along the way until they figured out the right thing. Whereas that D, who's done all the analysis, that is the expert, they're just going to go out and they're going to do the right thing first time.
So how would you use it then? So taking it back to, again, our audience, and again, if we use dog trainers as the example, how would you get to know and understand your clients or your prospective clients when you're engaging in conversations with them, aside from outwardly asking them, so which profile are you? How would you get to understand the other person's learning style?
It's not easy at all. So even as an expert within DISC, I still find it hard when I meet somebody for the first time, especially if I'm in a sales conversation, because a lot of my mind is focused in, right, what's the best way to hold this sales conversation in order to get a great result for me, a great result for them. So therefore, there's so much of my focus is on that as opposed to the other person, and that's. I think that's natural as somebody who's not been in sales for very long. I'm still kind of really kind of mindful of the right thing, the right processes to go through. Whereas somebody who's an expert in sales doesn't need to think about that. They can just focus on that person entirely. So it's not an easy thing to do. But there's tricks to kind of recognizing. So I'm fully aware of the tone of voice that sometimes I come across in. When I'm passionate about a subject, I think I've had a very direct tone where I've been explaining things on this podcast, because I'm passionate, I'm driven in. I don't need to think about something. I can just be my natural self and get the information out there, because the result for me in this situation is to help raise people's understanding of this. So I'm passionate, and therefore my natural tendencies are coming out. I'm quite direct. So when somebody is in a position where they're able to be their natural self, so let's say a dog owner who's come to you for dog training services, they're likely to be in their natural self. They might be a little bit on the defensive because they're just trying to go and sell something to me, but they're in their natural self. So if they're coming across in quite a direct way, and they're just asking questions that's based on how quickly can you solve this problem, that sort of thing, that gives you an indication straight away that that's a D profile. So don't go into long-winded explanations, just answer their questions and kind of focus on the results that they're looking for. If they come to you and they're very bubbly and they're very cheery, and they might just have a general chit chat about the weather and that sort of thing, that's an indication that they're probably an I profile. So spend some time talking about them. getting to know them, that's going to really warm them up and soften them into the conversation. If they if they come to visit you or visit your centre, and they're kind of quiet, they don't want to interrupt you, they spend a lot of time just looking around and being quite cautious, that's a good indication that they're probably an S profile, because they don't like being the centre of attention. So they're just going to go around, they're just going to be very agreeable. Spending time asking them questions about what they need is going to really comfort that down. If they come to you and they're very detail orientated and they're asking loads of questions, having the patience to allow them to just ask all of the questions that they need to ask is going to warm them up and make them feel a lot more comfortable with you. So it's just kind of recognizing those traits will really help you to be able to build the relationships that you want. So as a dog trainer, you're not just selling a lead. You're not a vet store, are you? That's just selling articles to people. You've got long-term relationships in some cases. So you don't just want to convince somebody to come and buy a service off you. You want to have a comfortable, well-integrated community of dog owners that you can have great relationships with. So being able to recognize those traits within the people that come towards you and be able to adapt your style to be able to speak to them in their preferred style is going to make them far more comfortable and far more willing to kind of really listen to you and then apply the expertise that you're trying to teach them.
I could talk to you all day long on this. I think it's really interesting.
I do. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
We've brought her on board, Andy. Well done.
Yeah. I am trying to figure out what I am, though.
I think you've got S in you.
So how do you... Right, okay. So how do you go about... I mean, I know that's what you do. Do.
Yeah.
But how do you determine what someone is? So you talked a little bit about percentages earlier. Like, how do you come to that conclusion?
The reports that you get, so it just asks a series. I can't remember exactly because it's been a while since I've taken the test myself. But I think it's somewhere between 20 and 50 questions that you'll get asked, and you'll be various statements, and it's like you agree strongly, mildly agree, disagree strongly. And based on those answers, the algorithm within the DISC formula will just give you a report and tell you that these are your natural. This is you at your natural self. My one also has this is you when you're under stress, and this is how you've adapted. When your adapted self and your natural self, they're never going to be identical because we have lots of different people in our world at all time. They're never going to be identical, but if they're relatively similar, you're in a good place. The stress profile can be a little bit tricky because as a manager, having somebody whose stress profile is different to their natural profile, it makes it dead easy for me to recognize that they're under stress. Because when they start being like someone different to who they naturally are, that gives me verbal and visual cues that I might need to make an adjustment to the way that I'm employing them at the moment in order for them to get back to their natural self. But we do have a lot of people whose stress profile and their natural profile are almost identical. And that's very common within S profiles, by the way, because they don't like to outwardly show that they're under stress in case it upsets other people. So therefore, it's really important to understand that about ourselves, that while we might be feeling massive amounts of stress, outwardly, we're not giving any indications. So our managers have got, unless we tell them, they've got no way of knowing what's going on with us internally. So tendency could be, okay, well, they're fine because they're just being their natural self. Here's more work. I need you to do this. Okay, we're changing the goalposts. We now need to go and do that. And that S is going, internally, they're going, oh shit, I can't cope with this. But outwardly, they're going, okay, yeah, no problem whatsoever. So it's really important to have that self-awareness within us so that we can give those verbal indicators, like saying, right, boss, I need to slow down. Things aren't good at the moment.
I like it. Right. I feel like we should actually wrap it up before we do take a whole day talking about this, which I absolutely could. But no, thank you ever so much for joining us, Andy.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for bringing me on.
If people want to find out more about you and your work and what you do, how do they do that?
So LinkedIn is the social media platform that I spend the vast majority of my time on. My name is Andy Nisevic. I'm sure it will be in the comments for the podcast, won't they? So because I'm one of the only Nisevics in England. I'm not too hard to find. But my website is www.onedegree.uk, and there you'll see all the different the story about me and my background and the different services that I can offer.
Amazing. And one last question then. Who else do you think would benefit our audience by coming on our podcast and being a guest?
What a great question.
Well, thank you.
It is a great question. We always stump people with this question.
So if your audience, who I'm assuming are owners of dog training businesses, are anything like me, when they first start their business, they know naff all about marketing. And it's something that I'm on a very, very steep learning curve for myself. So somebody who's able to come on and give some kind of no-nonsense, easy to follow advice on how to engage with the audience so that you can show up in the right places where the right people are in a way that kind of raises that intrigue. I know when I first started my business, if I had access to that kind of information, it would have made my life really, really easy. Well, not really easy, but much easier in the beginning.
Amazing. We will keep that journey going and making sure that we get lots of marketing people on, which is the plan.
There is am I allowed to make a recommendation? I don't know how. So there's a friend of mine who's a member of a couple of business communities that I've got in Lincolnshire. Her name's Caroline Grant. She's a co-founder of a branding agency called Quirk. And what I love about them is that they don't look at the market, they look at the person, and they kind of brand the individual, and they look at what's quirky about you and kind of really lean into that. So kind of that whole adage of people buy from people. Okay, well, let's learn about what's quirky about you and kind of really lean into that. And some of the results that I see for their clients is absolutely amazing. So someone like that would be well worth connecting and bringing in, I think.
Oh, I like that. Quirky. Oh,
yeah. Oh, Andy, you'll have to hook us up.
Yeah.
I will do. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, well, thanks again. And we will leave you to your day.
Thank you very much. And hope this has been useful to everyone.
See you later.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.